Good afternoon or good evening. Presumably you can be wherever and whenever. We are hoping that we're all reading the Chronological Bible together, and this is a brief discussion of our first 7 days of reading. Genesis, of course, is where we're reading, and this is foundational to our understanding of the Bible, because it states clearly that God created the universe. It's entirely possible that God could have used a Big Bang, as is currently accepted as the means by which the universe came into existence. There's certainly no reason to believe that's impossible. However, that method of creation would, in fact, as stated in the very first verse of our reading, have created an earth that was formless and void, which is certainly a possible path of creation. It certainly, however, was not the result of a random quantum fluctuation. It was indeed the action of God that made this creation occur. And it's very important that we realize God's authority to define good actions and bad actions springs from his ownership of the entire creation, because it was in fact his creation. I would like to bring to your attention that before sin entered the world, this creation, the no longer formless and void earth, life was not followed by death. Death was not an immutable result of life. And also I would bring to your attention that vegetation started before there were lights in the expanse of the sky, in the heavens above. This seems to imply that this was before either the sun was created, maybe that's the only thing that changed, or that the earth was not initially orbiting the sun in the habitable zone. Perhaps the earth was created separate from the sun. We don't know, but the point being that vegetation was growing, supported by light provided by God, before there were lights in the heavens above. Another important point is the distinction between God's creation of life and the evolutionary hypothesis that single-celled creatures came into existence spontaneously and evolved into critters and people. This is an obviously flawed concept. No experimental evidence has ever suggested that life can spring from non-living matter, nor have any changes from one kind of animal or plant to another kind of animal or plant ever been observed experimentally. It is true that the various kinds were clearly designed by God with extreme adaptability. Natural selection, i.e. evolution, can and has been observed to take place within the kinds. The current SARS-CoV-2 virus is an example of true evolution. Notice that it is destructive, not constructive. The concept of the evolutionary hypothesis that the death of failed kinds leads to better creatures is seriously in error. Death entered the created world when Adam and Eve sinned. We have no idea, really, how old Adam and Eve may have been at the time that sin occurred. We know that Adam and Eve had their first child 130 years approximately after creation. If we assume that time is ratcheting forward by the end of the 7th day of creation. So death entered the world as a result of that sin. And it was not that sin did not occur until Adam and Eve succumbed to the temptation that Satan provided. It's conceivable that before the first sin, God did not even institute, and this is highly hypothetical on my part, the third law of thermodynamics, which says that the universe has a continuously increasing entropy, more and more randomness. It's possible that before that time, before sin entered the world, that entropy was not always increasing. Note that the evolutionary hypothesis has also been used, primarily in the 1800s, the 19th century, to justify making slaves of human beings who were less evolved. Clearly a very sinful act, and in general, the evolutionary hypothesis is a destructive concept. The Creator has the authority to define our responsibilities because He made us, and He has decided how we may be freed from sin. So we look forward to reading on as we study the history of the early years of creation.